Hello.
Hello.
Your name, please?
I'm Derek Tam-Scott. You are Jason Cammisa. This is the Carmudgeon Show. This week's episode is the little behind the scenes on some drag race replay, Cammisa's Ultimate Drag Race Replay. I think they're both live now as of your consumption of this episode, so you can watch them if you haven't. Should viewers watch them before or after we talk about them here?
I'm not sure we divulged the winners from everything, so I think they should listen to the behind the scenes, to the background of all the cars. There are 10 cars. One of the episodes has 3, and the other one has 7. There are 10 cars, and we sort of give quickie reviews of each one of them in this episode. So yeah, listen to us, me mostly, I'm sorry, blather on, and then go watch some good stuff.
Cool. And don't forget to join the Hagerty Drivers Club, which includes a subscription to their award-winning magazine, and unlimited access to their valuation tool, discounts on events and miscellaneous products, and the like, and unlimited flatbed towing for all of your classic cars, but not your classic books.
And don't forget,
there's a link in the description.
Don't forget that we are sponsored by Vredestein Tires, and I demand
we're about. We'll talk about that in momentarily.
I
you demand better.
That you clap.
Okay.
Oh no! There we go.
Oh, thank God.
I know. Imagine a Carmudgeon show without. All we need is some Mariah Carey. You know that song, right? I mean, it came out in your elderly days.
Do I know that song?
Silver bells. That's the one, right?
That's not
Santa smells.
Okay.
Is that? Or that's no. That was the Batman song. I'm sure there's some like ridiculously ruined.
Okay, so it's almost the end of the year. We're going to.
You want to get back to work? Oh my God! All right, down to it. Let's talk cars. I'll get rid of the festivities.
Oh no, less festive. I don't care.
Well, if I remove this bush, you can see more of my vagina.
Oh my God!
Have you ever taken a long, hard look at my vagina's rear end?
I'm trying to avert my eyes.
It's that way. It's that way.
Yes, that's why I'm averting my eyes. Okay. What is this episode about?
This episode is about the fact that my Vangina is still on Vredestein Winter tires.
Have you driven them in the snow yet? No. Because we live in California.
Jake is the only one that have. No, I'm waiting for it to snow. I'm wishing for snow. You're
going to be waiting a long time, especially if this global warming business is a thing, because we're at a grand altitude total of, 140 feet somewhere?
Not even close to that. I would like for the record to state hereby right now that in order to perform my workerly duties for the Hagertys, I'm going to have to take a road trip to Tahoe over Christmas and experience snow in my Vangina, together with those Vredestein Wintrac tires, so I can evaluate them fully, and I will be expensing that $1,000 a night hotel room
you should get a 42-inch disco ball from a stripper in Reno. Was that? Reno?
Yeah.
That was the last.
That was the last time I drove in
Tahoe journey.
Big snow.
Yeah, it was quite snowy then.
However, my Vangina doesn't whistle anymore. Sorry, we
took new tires.
Yeah, it's the new tires. Well, we took the roof rack off and for that last trip, and it is remarkably quiet thanks to those new winter tires.
Okay, so
I love Michelin Pilot Sport Force, but they are not quiet. Turns out, Vredestein winter tires are much quieter than
which is not something you guaranteed with
winters,
inclement weather tires.
Yeah. We just need more inclement weather or inclement. Is there a correct pronunciation? Or is this tomato?
This is like one of those words. There's like a whole bunch of words in the English language where if you shift the emphasis, it moves it from being like a noun to a verb, like console versus console. There's shitloads of words like this. Detail versus detail is another one of those.
I would say detail for both.
I know, I would too. There's a lot of words.
Speaking of detail.
Where there's at least a dozen words.
Hold on. Demand better tires. Demand Vredestein.
No, those are both verbs. Shit. Okay.
I would like to place a demand for better tires. Therefore, I demand Vredestein.
Okay. Sure. Why not?
I demand.
So this episode is brought to you by Vredestein, it sounds like. Okay.
Yeah, they're the
Who
sponsor of
supplies
the
winter
Carmudgeon.
tires and has supplied the tires for the Mercedes service wagon. I'd like to put a set of the Quattracs on my R129 also because we have this dream of doing a rally for 4,000-pound plus cars, and I think that I have mismatched tires front to rear, and the dimensions are mismatched because I still have the tires that I bought the car on, which are some sort of. I think one of them was Arizonans, which I've never even heard of.
Well, the people, the state,
No,
or the
the tire.
tires.
The
Well,
tire is
brand
called an
was-
Arizonan or something like that. Or maybe that's the model. I don't know. In any case, the R129 with Vredesteins would be a market improvement, and I think it would be the Quattracs, which are the tires that we have on the service wagon, which I look forward to rallying. Should be fun for our 4,000-plus
for the
pound
Big Bertha.
car.
What do we call
Yeah,
it? We called it something. We came up with a fun name.
Large Marge.
Large Marge.
Large Marge rally
Yeah.
for 4,000-pound plus cars.
I do still need to dyno the CSI.
I mean, that car actually has sporting intent.
The CSI?
Yes, whereas the other 4,000-pound cars, like the 560 SEC, which we brought on the last one, which is the origin of this idea, and the R129, I think, is maybe not going to be the right tool
Sporting
for
on
rally.
in Mercedes.
Yeah, it'll be entertaining. I think it'll just be you're gonna find my pace might be inadequate if you're in
I'm
the
fine with that.
BMW.
No, the only thing I worry about is stone chips. I
Yeah.
need to PPF the front of that car because I know I like the idea of a reasonable speed rally. I also know myself well enough to know that I will be 1 inch off your bumper, and then we'll destroy the paint on the front of the car. Plus, I got Euro lights for it, and I don't want to destroy those. I haven't installed
Clear
them yet.
bra. Yeah.
Anyway, one day we will Vredestein our way through the mountains. Although I just bought Michelin's for that car. They were not cheap.
No, they.
I
never
like
are.
little shitbox cars that have little shitbox tires that cost
Yeah.
little shitbox amounts of money.
Yep.
Oh well.
It's pretty luxurious.
What you gonna do?
You
I
have
need-
an adult car now.
needed a
or
V12.
adult tire sizes at least. I mean,
grown up.
18s that are what are they? 255s.
285s
Oh,
in the back.
wow.
Yeah.
Beefy.
Gripsicles. For that's what I don't want because that car, the clutch is NLA.
Oh.
So if I were to do a bunch
You'd
of
like the
launches-
tires to be the fuse.
Yes. Yeah. I'd like for nothing to
Well,
break
you
on the
shouldn't
car.
have 4Ss. You should have some kind of.
They were the same price as all season.
What's the
4s.
lowest grip tire though that you could?
Oh, X-Ice. Or
Yeah.
like actually I have a set of General Altimax RT43s on my spare cabbie wheels. And I bought them because they were actually well rated by people who have never experienced a good tire. I mean, I'm sure there's nothing wrong with them when compared to like a Flintstones concrete wheel, but they're loud. They make a lot of noise. They're actually fine. They're not. They were like $46 a piece on special or something.
Yeah. Hard to argue with that.
Yes.
None of that nonsense with Vredestein, of course. Okay. We have
With over a century of what was that?
European innovation.
European innovation.
That's right.
Oh my God. We're not supposed to make fun of our sponsors. But hey, apparently like 2 episodes ago, I wound up pinning a comment because there were 2 comments and I don't remember which one I pinned. One was
One of them, the one that you pinned, said, "I spent 9 minutes and 20 seconds listening to an ad and I liked it," or something like that.
That was the one I pinned because I'm like, this is amazing. And because also in that same episode, someone else was like, this Vredestein stuff needs to stop ASAP. Really? You want to sponsor the episode? Go right the fuck ahead. Like, I'm happy to sponsor, to accept a sponsor that gives us tires for my van Jynah, but also like makes good stuff. Like, leave me alone.
Yes, for a product that we genuinely enjoy and use
Or
ourselves.
sir, would you rather us get like ball deodorant like other podcasters are marketing? I mean, you've heard these ads, right? About like, anyway, I'm gonna shut up now. Oh, and then the other comment was, for the first time ever, I've actually bought a set of
some product that was
spent money
recommended
on a
on a podcast.
And then there were a bunch of like, me too. So I was like, hey, that's good.
So too have we.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, so we've covered my Van Jynah's squeaky rear end. So it's time to move on to the 35,000. Well, not really. So you were present for filming on the double-headed cooter shoot that included the old man GTs.
Driving primarily the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT
63.
63.
This was a tough one because we got a lot of flack in the comments for not having like an Aston Martin. Well, Aston Martin has refused to participate. For not having a Ferrari, Ferrari has refused to participate. There was another omission that one of the other car companies said, you're not having our car if you have that car. So we had to kill one other car that we lined up. There's a lot of politics that go into this, mostly because people who work for car companies are... You have a very large dictionary.
Why don't you tell me? Okay, all right.
No, that's not right. I say that for the record in the British sense. Just like twat. You know.
Yes. Okay.
Everyone at all the car companies is very scared about losing a race. To which I say, make a faster car. But
their cars are also damn fast now, right? You're reinforcing
fast.
the sort of drag race of attributes that nobody actually, it's all so academic.
I mean, then you have the flip side of this, which is Lamborghini's quote, which I'll never forget, which is our customers aren't interested in straight line speed, which was just the stupidest thing any PR person could have ever said.
I think you could say that about a lot of cars, but a Lamborghini does not strike me as one
exactly. A Prius. Meanwhile, we did ask for a Prius at one point, and Toyota was like, yeah, what are you doing with it? And we're like, drag racing it. Oh, okay, cool. But it didn't, it wound up not
well,
fitting
they
the
knew
episode.
It wasn't going to impact the sales of their car.
Well, I would say the same about a Lamborghini, right? I mean, is anyone
so then you're making fun of the PR person for saying exactly the thing that is true.
No, but like anyone's going to say, well, 10.2 to 60 or through the quarter mile is my absolute limit, and if this thing pulls a 10.3, I'm going to cancel my order for my $500,000 car. I should hope there are more factors in there, and whatever. It's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. It's all so absurdly fast that it's immaterial.
It's immaterial, but they absolutely do care about straight line speed, or the cars would have 3-cylinder hybrid. They'd be i8s. Anyway,
they care about experience also, and I mean, I think the main value add from doing this sort of science here is that it's like interesting to see how a car that is underrated or an underdog objectively on paper, if you're just looking at horsepower, somehow pulls out a win because of this or that, and sort of getting deep into the analysis of that, I think, is the actual value add.
Well, that's what we try to do.
Format.
Right. And that's what we try to do with that format. So we've said before, everything we do is based on instrumented testing numbers. I go out and test the cars. It's the same testing procedure it's sort of my own custom testing procedure, but it's a hybrid mix between the procedure that I did at Automobile, the procedure that we did at Road and Track, which was similar to Automobile, and then Motor Trend. And then I use a weather correction for naturally aspirated cars. I don't weather correct turbo cars, which is why I'm sometimes slower than Car and Driver, which apparently does. Motor Trend does not. Motor Trend did not. I don't think Motor Trend doesn't exist anymore. Talk about getting your Christmas wish.
Does it actually not exist anymore?
No, they've stopped doing all video. So Motor Trend video is dead. It only took 5 years since we left.
Of middling performance.
No, don't be middling. No, there was not middling. That was, I recently pointed out to one person who is a automaker PR who invited a Motor Trend person to do a video, and they flew this person and a crew all the way to Europe to do an exclusive launch of something, and the video got 37,000 views in a month, and it was a big car, and I'm like, so my repost of the press photo with a comment on it got like 290,000 views. Maybe you should stop inviting Motor Trend. Not that I'm bitter about Motor Trend, but it's kind of difficult for the legacy PR people to wrap their head around that brand is dead. I mean, it's been dead for years. Now it's officially dead, at least on the video side.
Neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there. So anyway, this last comparison was we wanted basically every car that says the word GT in it, or has the initials GT in it.
So that was Bentley Continental.
Bentley Conti GT Speed was my sort of starting point. Like, okay, if there's a new GT Speed, it went from a W12 to a V8, and gained a hybrid system and gained 1,300 pounds in the process. But it's 777 horsepower now.
It's not trivial.
No, massive amounts of power. So I'm like, okay, 771 horsepower, that deserves a go. And so what other cars say GT in them? So, or just are perfect GTs. And there was kind of a lot of stuff that we wanted to do that car companies didn't participate. But what we wound up with was a great lineup, actually. It was AMG GT63, There is an SE Performance that's coming in January with hybrid.
Does that mean it's a hybrid?
That is the hybrid with 800 horsepower, 800 and change, which I said in the video. And then the third car was McLaren GTS. I wanted McLaren GT. That's now been replaced by the GTS. So that was a little bit of a strange inclusion, but it's still a carbon-tubbed hypercar, effectively a supercar.
Yes.
With rear-wheel drive and no back seats, but it is a GT in the sense of a comfortable interior and suspension and
that whole hatchback arrangement with glass where you put luggage on top of it, which is a major practicality enhancement for McLaren.
Yeah. So just that's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that. The only thing we put on the back was a teacup while we were revving it and watching it. But flat plane V8s are very coarse and very vibrate-y. Mm-hmm. So it's fun watching the teacup. And then we came up with this whole idea of like, Gran Turismo. I'm just like, no American has ever used the word Gran Turismo and to not talk about the video game.
Yes. It's not a format of car consumption that we're super big on, and it like makes a ton of sense in Europe.
Does it? Or did it? So the idea of a Gran Turismo.
I kind of do it when I'm there a little bit.
Yeah, but you
whatever
did it in like
whatever is handy. Yes.
Yeah, a Toyota Yaris GR.
Yes, that's true.
That is the opposite of Gran Turismo.
It was the opposite of a Gran Turismo.
I mean, I think the idea of a GT, a car that you could get in and attain and maintain high speeds in comfort over long distances for your drive from London to the south of France, right? Yeah. Was because those cars were exceptionally comfortable at a time when most cars not only couldn't attain the speeds that you were able to cruise at. Every car can go 70 miles an hour now. And that's the speed, especially in Europe, that you're going most of the time because of fucking speed limits everywhere.
And speed cameras to enforce.
Yeah. And so I think the idea of a Gran Turismo is wonderful, but it's...
Well, you have to take the German route.
Yeah, but even still, then
I know there's a lot of traffic.
There's a lot of
the amount of time that, like on a regular driving day in Germany on the unrestricted Autobahn, that you can actually be using VMAX, and it's never more than 5 minutes at a time.
I'm not going to say not in a car these fast, but I'm even going to say none of these cars would ever even hit VMAX, and I don't think GT is about VMAX.
I'm just talking about like
250,
cruising at
280.
Yeah, I was going to say 200K, cruising at 200K.
You can do that a lot. It depends on where you are and what time of day and day of the week. But I mean, the best was when we did that European trip last October. I don't even remember when it was.
It was 2 Septembers ago, but yes.
Who are you? Where am I? Why is my Jynah on fire? What? Yeah, that was, I mean, in a very underpowered E30. I was at...
We were also in the middle of the night.
There was also that, but I was at VMAX for probably a half an hour at a time. Yeah. Great. It was fun. But the idea that you should be comfortable at 120, 130 miles an hour for hours on end is really describes every car today.
Yes.
So, so what GT has come to mean is a big old man sled, right? And that's actually how we referred to the episode while I was writing the script. And it was sort of like old man GTs.
Because they're among the few people who can afford them, but also it's a type of use that appeals, I think, to it's a bygone era.
It's just who has space and money for a car the size of a house that fits sort of nothing in it. They're just they're very much jewelry, right?
Sure. Yes.
So it takes really a lot of money and
yes, this is like in the early 90s. Mid-90s maybe, there was like a sort of survey. Mercedes used to make these dealer guides. Here we are talking about Mercedes. I'm sorry. I'm talking about Mercedes. They made these presentation guides, what they called them, and it was basically like a thing that was training salespeople on how to sell the cars. And I bought one for an S-Class, and I bought one for an SL, and they had demographic info about earning for the different buyers of various cars, and it compares them. And the S-Class buyer was making like, in 95 or 97 or whatever, it was like between $150,000 and $200,000 a year, and the SL buyer was making $375,000 at the same time, because the person who spends the same amount of dollars effectively on one car versus the other, you have to be making twice as much money in order to spend that kind of money for a car that seats two.
Well, my question was, what would a S-Class coupe owner be making?
Yeah, they didn't pull that out separately.
Yeah, because they couldn't count that high. I mean, it's, you know, an S class is a practical thing, $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year. Then you get to SL, and then you get to SEC, and that was baller money.
Yeah, yeah, but people could daily drive an SEC, and I think they'd be less inclined to do that with an SL. I don't know. Anyway, point is, if you're having a big expensive car that only seats 2 people, you're making twice as much money as if you have a big expensive car that seats 4 people
or 5. Yeah, agreed. The surprise in the episode was, first of all, Bentley was so stupid fast.
Yeah,
I mean, I cracked off a 2.6 repeatedly, 2.6 to 60.
This is the most VW group thing ever.
I mean, it was hilarious. I started testing it. I got a 2.8 right away, and I'm like, God, this is amazing, because it wouldn't give me launch control. So I get the cars, they show up, and it's up to me to figure out how to get the computers to do what they want to do. I don't know what combo of ESP off versus sport mode or whatever.
Mode and race mode.
It was just, 2 feet in, it was giving me like 2,300 RPM. And I let my foot off the brake, and the thing just took off. And it did 2.8. And I was like, mind blown. Like, this is amazing. Just repeated 2.8s. And then we go to practice. I get all the numbers. I get it all crunched. Everything's done. And I wound up, I don't remember what mode change I made, what I did differently. I think I found the tranny sport mode, and then it did. I go both feet in, and all of a sudden it gives me 5.5 or 5,200 RPM. And I'm like, that's different. Pull my foot off the brake, and it dumps the clutch. And I'm like, holy shit. And then not only does that, it slam shifts. So the shifts are harder. And all right, get the V-Box back out and do this again before we'd ever even started filming, thank God. And it was 2.6. I mean, just that is Veyron beating territory. And I know Veyron's getting old, but like, Jesus Christ.
It's also Porsche turbo-ing.
Yeah.
Basically.
So that was kind of a nice surprise. The McLaren was absolutely epically consistent. We ran that race 80
Which
times.
is wild, because it's rear-wheel drive. You think there would be some difficulty in putting down that kind of power?
Especially on the surface at Willow. We've had a lot of problems getting... It's taken a lot of... Not problems, but it's taken a lot of work to get cars to hook up there. First of all, they wheel hop. That's the next episode. We'll talk about that. Something about that surface just really pisses tires off. And I have to do a lot of tricks to get the hot tires really hot to get them to hook up. Or I just see numbers that aren't representative of what I think the car can do. Z06 was probably the hardest. It was a day of fighting with it to get that real number, an appropriate number out of it. And I think it was a fluke. I don't think I'd ever get a 2.5 to 60 out of that car again. But hey, it's what we got. I'm running with, but it was work. And the McLaren, just no work at all. You both feet in, and it's got this building boost thing, and it just sits there. And you hear the boost build, and it's like, bung. It doesn't bung, but it just says, all right, ready to go. And it was consistent and no wheel spin over, initially there's a wheel spin on the launch, but I was concerned. I put a helmet on when I was testing, because I'm like, this thing could easily do a hard shift, throw itself sideways, and put me into a wall at great speed. Completely. I made Randy drive for the filming. Randy can handle anything, and he was like, it's pussycat. And so, yeah, that was a hell of a performance from a car. And it did it 100 times without ever throwing an error message, ever carrying. The Mercedes threw a check engine light from revving. So we rev the piss out of these engines for sound, for that intro thing when we're sort of panning past the engine. You want the engine rocking, boom, 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 and it pissed it off.
It would periodically also fail to deliver launch control.
That's right.
It would either decide that, I don't even know what it was deciding, but sometimes it just didn't give you a full launch control start. So
did that car freewheeled and then would dump clutch? I don't remember. I only drove that car to test it. I didn't drive it for anything else. It didn't. No, I don't think it loaded up the torque converter, because I think it's got a multiplate. I think it dumps it. So would it freewheel and then just not dump it?
It wouldn't go. So launch control, normally it's supposed to hold the revs at whatever it is, 4,000 or something like that. And sometimes it would just not do that. And then it would say launch control not available.
Okay. So at least it told you it was giving you the middle finger.
Sometimes, not always. Other times it just didn't. But you could tell immediately if it wasn't going to launch properly, because it wouldn't give you the full boost building. But it was otherwise very reliable and consistent in its launches. Four-wheel drive is also very easy to...
What I noticed about that car is it actually did get wheel spin off the line. Like the Bentley didn't get any. And actually, I think the four-wheel drive AMG got a little bit more wheel spin off the line than even the McLaren, the two-wheel drive McLaren did. It's nothing crazy, and it never shot in any direction. Just can go, and it would.
There was a little bit of light steering required at the launch for sure. And that thing ultimately got out horsepowered, which is what the hybrid SE version, I guess, is
going
to fix.
I assume
it was fast enough.
I mean, the Bentley has a 36 kilowatt hour. No, I think it's a small one. It's 26 or 28 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is bigger than the original Nissan Leafs. I mean, that's 80 miles of range in a typical car. Yeah. And so they can pull huge power repeatedly through there. And that battery never went below 90%. I was a psycho about we got to plug it in. It's got to be in it's got to be at 100% for testing. It didn't care all day, just running. It was just charging itself as it was, as we were going. And then Mercedes will have a much, much, much smaller battery pack, like 2 or 3 kilowatt hours, which is probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, from an engineering perspective.
I mean, what Bentley's doing is doing most of the EPA or the EU cycle in fully electric power to get that credit. So it only emits 23, I think it was, grams per kilometer of CO2.
With the assumption that nobody's going on any long trips.
Well, yeah, the test facility builds in certain amount of kilometers based on electric only usage, right. And then uses the CO2 output of that electricity. And then, so if you have 2 miles or 3 or 5 kilometers, whatever it is, of EV only range, you get that credit. And I think the Bentley can travel so far, it probably does the entire test on electricity.
I was surprised. I learned when this Mercedes turned up that it is an all-new AMG GT that has it's very different from the last generation, the first generation of AMG GT.
First generation was a Viper.
Yeah,
this was a Viper lineage.
And this one is an SL.
100% an SL.
So it weighs 500 million pounds more, or whatever it was. It's more than 500 pounds more. And it has 4-wheel drive. And the availability of back seats. Yeah, it's an SL coupe, I guess, that looks more aggressive. It looks very similar, I think, to the last one. You don't think so?
Similar to the last one. My problem is it's a 911 ripoff.
Yes.
So at one point, I have a picture of this that I'll have to dig up. Sorry, Jake. I took a picture of the rear 2/3 of the car. So I sort of left out the hood and took a picture of it. And the car is just a 911. Yeah. And I have a problem with that. You are Mercedes motherfucking Benz. That's its middle name, by the way.
I didn't know what that's. The hyphen is actually extremely small font.
It's MF. Little MF next to it. Do not copy anyone. Do not copy Porsche. That is just, it is so. With that, I will say that the greenhouse of the SLS, the original SL Gullwing was 100% Porsche 356. So I guess that is, maybe I should shut up, because maybe that is, if you've ever sat inside, and I will have this picture too. We actually talked about this in the Revelations video of the Gullwing, the 300 SL. You can very clearly see the window opening is 911 shaped. So they did copy 911s back then, or I guess 356s, Porsches back then. Either way, I think it's absolutely fine that it moved to the same platform. I just wish it didn't look so much like a Porsche. But yeah, that one was an interesting episode, but the fun one, I don't know if you did, but I had so much more fun, was on this week's episode. So this was a great one, and I'm very curious to see how this will do traffic-wise for us. But there are, we're covering...
It's relatable, and it's a larger number of cars.
Right. So this is, the previous episode's $300,000-$500,000 cars, and this is, I guess, $200,000-$400,000 cars. And this is... I drew the line at $35,000. What can you get for $35,000? And there were 7 cars. I'm going to pull the picture out.
Yes, there was the...
So the base price of the car had to start in that performance specification had to be under. It was originally 33. I thought a third of 100, but we made it 35K. And technically, the Mustang showed up with a performance package that bumped it right over 36 or 37, something like that.
Yeah, it was an expensive performance pack. It had big Brembo brakes
and some stuff that isn't going to change straight line speed, but also a different final drive ratio and sticky tires. So
both of which were material factors, as it turned out.
Yeah, that thing. Okay, so the list of cars, and I'm just pulling up a picture of the lineup of them, was Toyota GR86, the only naturally aspirated car of the bunch. Subaru WRX, Hyundai Elantra N.
Elantra N.
Well, you're giving away the fact that I purposefully mispronounced everything.
Oh, that's right.
So the Great 6 was GR86. The WRX was the WRX. The Hyundai Elantra, the Elantra N. The Ford Mustang, the Mustang EcoBoost.
It's the 4-cylinder.
Volkswagen GT, which could have actually made an appearance in the previous episode, the GT episode.
Oh, because it has a GT.
I mentioned it because the crazy thing was that Bentley was 130 miles an hour at the end of the quarter mile, which is higher than the GTI's limiter in the US.
The Mark 8 GTI has a limiter?
I think 121, 122. Considerably higher than the limiter.
Really?
Like, think about that. That thing in a quarter mile is already going faster than you'd be able to go in a GTI on an Autobahn. If we had Autobahns, because the European ones are probably limited to 155. Mini Coopers, which everyone has forgotten about. And then Mazda
3 Turbo.
3 Turbo. Turbo 3? 3 Turbo Mazda is what I called it. And this was it. Like normally when we aim for the stars for the Cooter episodes, we get 1/3, a half, 2/3, some number, some small proportion of the cars that we wanted. This was every single thing we wanted. We chose the 86 over the Miata. We didn't want the Miata because it's just, you don't want two Mazdas. And one of the premise behind this thing is you're in college. Your parents give you a $35,000. I didn't go into this detail. Your parents give you a $35,000 limit on cars because that's a reasonable amount of
money in today's market
on a car. But you're an enthusiast. What do you get? And I think it's a lot too. But like, you're a lucky kid, and your parents want to buy you a $35,000 car. Great. Miata's not really going to pass the parent test.
Okay.
GR86 is the sort of limit.
Pitching at the corners.
Yeah. So, yeah. And plus Mazda 3 Turbo, man, everyone forgets that car exists. So I love the sort of sleeper factor there.
Yeah.
So we want to start with Grady 6.
I didn't get to drive it much at all. And so I still have not really driven one.
Oh, we got to fix this.
Yeah. I was thinking about doing a Christmas weekend trip and just Turoing one. And really going and hauling the mail in it because I'm interested.
Let's see if we can get a press car.
I'd like that idea too, for sure. My impression of that car from just moving it around was that I wanted to Turo one and haul ass in it. That was what I left with.
That's a really good impression.
I was impressed. Like, the interior is kind of quite nice. It's pleasant. It's just like a sort of pleasant thing to sort of run around in. And I was thinking, I have the GTI track car, which was $4,000 plus an espresso machine, and it understeers terminally. And I was thinking, like, what else could I get as a track car? Maybe it's an E36 M3 for 10 or 15 grand. That's kind of scruffy. And then I was like, oh, then like a GR86, and then it could just kind of be more of a car. But I've never driven one. I'm curious. So I was sort of toying with the idea of wanting to just experience one because I had this. It gave me this sensation, which I don't get in a lot of most cars. That as I'm getting in and out of cars, is that I'd like to spend a lot of time in this car and get to know it very well, which normally I don't experience in many modern cars. So
that's it. I mean, I'm bummed that that's all the time you got, because I thought we had tried to engineer some time for you to spend with the car. It's just these shoots are so busy.
I know, like especially short days. We were shooting in November or whatever it was.
Yeah, people forget about that. Like, December 21st is nightmare material for the shortest day of the year, but everything for a month or two on either side of it is miserable with so little daylight.
Yeah, you really got to be. You don't have time to fuck around.
And this was stupid. We were stupid. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cars in this episode, and we keep talking about like the idea behind the Cooter format was 3 cars, 1 race. Like, let's make it simple. And we just keep doing like 4 cars or 5 cars and then 3 races.
And then you have to run heats.
Plus a skydiver falling. Like, we've just done stupid shit, which I love, but it takes so much time that we just frankly don't have. But that 86 is without question the car I would have taken home.
Yeah. I mean, it's even on paper, you can kind of infer that because it's rear wheel drive and it's a manual and it's naturally aspirated.
So much slower than the others that, and actually turns out not to be. But I thought it was going to be visually left completely in the dust. It doesn't have a lot of traction off the line. That's one of its problems.
Launching it was, I did 1 or 2 launches in that car, and I was like, oh, this is going to be some dialing in required here.
Yeah, it's not that. It just doesn't want to put power down. And on a track, when you say your GTI is terminal understeer, this is terminal fucking like pucker. Like it's everything you do throws it sideways, which is one of the reasons I love it. I adore that car. And this was a Trueno, which is, special edition, $40,000. But the idea that you can, for $30K, get this car that's just second only to a Miata and smiles on your face was,
worth including.
I'm in love with that car. WRX.
I don't think I drove it at all.
So,
we should also add that where available, all the cars
Yes.
were manual. If they didn't come in a manual, then they were automatic. Otherwise, they were manuals.
that was another complete coup, was that we wound up getting the manual version of every car that was available with a manual. So cool.
So
WRX.
the WRX was a manual.
Yep. And it is available with the CVT. But no, absolutely fucking not. I have a problem with the WRX because I think it looks meh. It's there. It's a car. I do not like the fender opening shape. I think it's got some styling elements that I don't like on it. But every time I get in one, I'm immediately turned off by the engine. It's this feeble sounding starter and then this gritty drain disposal happening. And they idle at 2,000 when they're cold. And so you're just like, and I just hate it. And then I drive them and I like them. They are so good over a bumpy, twisty road. Good and not exciting, capable. And they unflappable. But we really thought we were going to blow this thing up. Like we filmed around it so that we could exclude it from the episode because to get a manual transmission, all-wheel drive, laggy, turbocharged car off the line, do you know what I did? I beat everyone's 0 to 60 time. God damn it, I don't remember what I got out of it. But I beat everyone. Like what we'll do when we're doing research for this things, right? We want to effectively go in this knowing that the cars are comparable. If it's so clearly one car is going to be so much faster than the others, it's no point, right? There's no point in having it there. Unless we're using it to show perspective on how much faster it is than something else. But I want the races to be tight. And so we just sort of compile typically car and drivers numbers. And then if I'm like a second off, I know I'm doing something wrong. But we went into this going, all right, whatever it was that car and driver got, like, 4.0 or 4.8 or something, we're like, all right, I'll be happy if I get a 5-second run. And then we have to recreate this 200 times while we're filming, slight exaggeration. So I'll go super easy on it. And you know what happens when I get behind the wheel of a car. Like I did the first launch and it was not that aggressive. And I was a 10th off of or something like car and driver's numbers. And I'm like, wow, it was not bad. And then I did my second launch and I do my trademark. So the idea is you can't just dump the clutch from like 5,000 RPM because it'll stall, right? You need to have boost. So I'll do a throttle whack, progressively bigger. So you're using huge throttle open, gobs of throttle to send a lot of air down to pre-spool the turbo. So you're getting boost. So it's wham, 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 and go. And I launched at like 5,200 RPM or something, like over $5,000. And I just got a time that I did not expect. And so then we had to recreate that every single time. And so I put Randy in the car because I thought, all right, if I tell Subaru, like Randy Popes blew up your transmission and like, shattered 4 axles and by the way, the diff is in pieces and here's your transmission and whatever, they'll be less mad because it's Randy and Randy's can get away with it. The car was perfect. Didn't blow a head gasket, which is very unusual for.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, the car was very fast, stupid short gearing. You had to work to, and it also feels like it revs down like 64 or something like that, and it feels like it go another 1,000 or 2,000 RPM because it's still very much in the power band.
And so, is that a longevity thing, or is that a synchro mesh surviving thing, or is that
my guess is it's just
valve train,
like piston speed or something. Sure. They put a big turbo on it to make big power, which gives it significant-ish lag down low. But I just, the Japanese versions of that engine, the STIs, have always been like 2 liters, and they rev to 8 or 82.
They do 2.5s for the
So I think
US.
this one's a different family, but I think it's probably just, longer stroke, so they don't want to rev it that high. Next car, Hyundai Elantra N. Did you drive this?
I had the misfortune of being next to it when it was being launched.
So we did one of the stand-ups early on, and I said the words, "We're genuinely concerned this thing is we're gonna break something," because even though the Subaru, we were worried, the Subaru was like a 4 out of 5, a 4 out of 10 worry. This was a 9. The axle hop was so violent on this thing, and it didn't matter how gently I launched it or hard I launched it. It's just first gear, just bang, 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 bang. And it was not just the wheel sort of like feeling like it's leaving the pavement and then crushing through the surface of the earth. It was the suspension
like there
bushings.
was some suspension somewhere where the rubber part got all used up, and then it was just metal on metal, like control arm on chassis or something.
It sounded like brake rotor on windshield. I don't know what the hell it was. It was so bad. And every time it banged out, I got a 4.9 to 60 out of it. And we fucked up. We're trying to figure it. Inside baseball, we're in edit right now, but I did one of the stand-ups using the previous number that I'd gotten out of one, which was 5.0 to 60, saying it was approaching the fastest we've ever seen from a front-wheel drive car ever, which was 4.9 out of the Civic Type R. And I think actually I got a 4.8 out of this thing. Like it was just a monster. And go. And you're like, oh my God. Shift into second, like, oh, is it still wheel hopping? Oh my God, it's so fast. Boom, done, quarter mile. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was just terrifying to hear.
I'm sure.
From outside the car. Oh my God, from outside the car, there's all this ruckus. Even with the windows closed in the car next to it, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, it was horrifying.
There were like, you would only hear like maybe the 2 or 3 really hard
bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, and then the rest of it you couldn't hear from outside the car. But every time you definitely get a really scary sounding sound.
That is terrifying. Yeah, I mean, most front-wheel drive cars modern cars will wheel hop, and it's just a function of them using soft suspension bushing. Sorry, I'm having a Listerine pocket pack. This episode of Carmudgeon Show brought to you by
Vredestein tires.
Yes, Jason's delicious taste in his mouth brought to you by Listerine. Most front-wheel drive cars have soft bushings, so you know the engine. You don't feel horrible 4-cylinder vibration, but the result is this horrendous axle hop. The Elantra, what I loved about it is it sounded like something from outside. You know, we have a really hard time capturing sound of these drag races because most of the cars are so quiet, especially in this category of car, that you don't hear them over the wind and you don't hear the engines too much over the wind and tire noise. Yeah. And so we go and record every one of them individually.
Ford.
Yeah, I haven't gotten there yet. But so we go and record them separately and then have to patch that together because otherwise you just hear what sounds like static, just a wall of noise. But the Elantra starts up, makes noise, doesn't sound nearly as good as the Veloster N used to. But what a magnificently made for speed machine. Like that thing, other than the wheel hop, which I did not experience on other surfaces in that car. But what a fucking monster. Then there was the Ford Mustang EcoBoost.
Yes.
Talk about noise.
Yeah. It was not quite an Abarth, but it was definitely 4-cylinder ruckus. Rorty 4-cylinder ruckus.
Ruckus is the right word. I was shocked when I heard that thing start in the morning. Yeah. I turned around and looked at the McLaren because we shot this episode the same time. What the fuck is making all that noise? And it's just 4-cylinder rental grade Mustang.
Yep.
And then it starts moving and it's spitting and backfiring and popping and like, my God.
It's interesting to see Ford embracing the 4-cylinderness as opposed to trying to suppress it. Like you periodically hear an automatic V6 Mustang and with a really dumb exhaust on it. And you're like, ugh, why would you broadcast that you bought the slow one with an automatic?
V6.
Yeah, exactly. And this car, like unashamedly, was just like, I'm 4 cylinders. Here's all of the 4-cylinder noises.
And then some.
Yeah.
I mean, it must be like a speaker and another spark plug in that exhaust. It's loud.
Yeah.
Drowned the other cars completely out.
Yep.
Had a personality. This was an interesting one to test. And this I grapple with because I like manual cars because it is what it is, right? I will shift as absolutely quickly as the transmission will let me go. Could somebody else shift more quickly than I am? Than I can? Sure. But I'm human, right? I can only do what I can do. Modes are a problem. So we mentioned that Bentley that gave you 2,000 RPM launch versus a 5,000 RPM clutch dump and got 0.2 off. I tested the Mustang initially, and it was not fast. And I don't remember.
it had drag mode and it had track mode also.
So initially, I think I put it in sport. Turn stability control fully off. It's an automatic, right? So, and unlike the Bentley or that Mercedes, it's a torque converter automatic. So there's nothing you can do for the launch other than allow more revs and boost when you're brake torquing. All right, some cars will let you get to 1200 RPM and then shut the throttle, or they'll let you get to full, only half boost or full boost for a split second. And then the big way that automatics can quote unquote cheat is they can slam shift, right? So they realize Subaru CVTs are interestingly like this. So if you just flat foot them, they rev to red line and do a fake
approximate
shift.
a gear change.
If you brake torque it, it then knows it's being tested, and therefore just goes right to red line or horsepower peak and holds it there.
Which is the fastest way to go place.
It's less pleasant hearing, especially that horrendous flat four moo, but it's quicker and you get a better number. So all the car companies sort of play tricks. Volkswagen did this with DSGs where they're redlined at, like the GTIs are redlined 6,500-ish. But if you're in sport mode and you both feed in and it does launch control, it then will hold second gear until over 7,000 RPM, deep into the red line.
Which is probably about the time it's passing 60.
Conveniently, yes. It eliminates a shift. So everyone optimizes on their automatics. But I got a 5 and change out of this car, 5.3, 5.4. I don't remember what it was. I could look on my phone because I recorded that as the Mustang's number. And I'm like, that's just not, something's wrong. It's got a 10. So this performance pack has a shorter diff. Like a numerically higher diff ratio. And it's a 10 speed. And I mean, if you've ever like accelerated quickly on a 10 or 20 speed bicycle, you know this. You're like, every revolution of the crank, you're shift next gear. Yeah. And that's what it felt like. And it was going through the gears so quickly that it wasn't really even able to get boost in each of those gears because it would cut throttle. So you literally, and you're like, oh my God, calm the fuck down. And I got a crap number out of the car. And I thought, this isn't right. Like power to weight, this is wrong. And then I went back and checked what I think Car and Driver had tested one of these cars and they got a 4.8 or something. And I'm like, why am I so slow? Tested it like 4 or 5 times. Something's not right. And then I found drag mode, which I had completely forgotten about. Night and day difference. It no longer cuts power on shifts, so it doesn't cut boost and then have to rebuild it again. And it slam shifts every gear. So every one of those
Does it still use all of them?
I think it went through 72 gears by the time it was. I mean, it's like a Fast and the Furious movie, but instead of it's I think it knocked a second off 0 to 60, and it was close to a second. I should probably look and see if it's on my phone. In fact, I'm going to. While we talk, I'm a little bit on the fence about that because to get drag mode, like this is a separate mode and it has to then be in launch control, and it's right pushing the limit of what I think is acceptable because you're not really going to be able to, you're on the street, you're at a red light, and the light turns green. Are you like through like all these?
It depends
settings?
on who's next to you and if you know what's about to unfold, but potentially.
I mean, I guess if you own the car,
yes.
For the record, whoever did this new interface on Apple. Not new. It's now a couple months old. Have you not? I
have purposely not.
Oh, you haven't done the update?
It's I purposely not done it.
2 months ago.
Yeah.
I just want to try to find the screenshots because all of these numbers are screenshots. It's
good luck.
Mazda, Bentley, AMG. I wonder if it's probably on my other phone. So I use a different phone for the AMG Bentley V-Box. I will find it. I'm not finding it.
Doesn't exist.
November 5th. I'm going to do it by date. Sorry. Yeah. All the Apple users, my God, just don't even do this update. I can't find anything.
I purposely didn't because I refer to photos so often for archival purposes.
4.53 to 60. But you can actually see if you look and see those spikes, those are shifts.
Yeah.
So you get a big spike in G-force.
There's so many of them. I can't believe how many shifts it did.
It's in fourth gear. I mean, it's about to shift into fourth at 60. Damn it! I don't have the Mustang's
earlier run.
But I wrote it down. I'm like, this is. It's just. I think it's just borderline acceptable. But my God, a 4.5 second 4-cylinder Mustang.
Yeah.
Like that's almost GT that's like certainly GT Mustang fast, but like GT 500, GT 350. It's barely slower than a GT 350 was.
Yeah, that's
I
wild.
think those are 4.2. Yeah, and I don't love that you can't get it with a manual anymore. The 4-cylinder, that's dead. But hell of a performance from that.
I bet it would be just so astronomically slow, assuming that thing is just heavily boosted. It'd be laggy.
It'd be laggy, yeah.
With only 6 ratios.
Speaking of laggy, GTI. So Mark 7. So this is a 380.
Mark 8.
I'm sorry, Mark 8. This is a 380, which is the special edition. Not because it's 380 horsepower. I think it's very stupidly named. But it's 380. It was a part number or some. I don't even. It's in the script somewhere. I wrote it back in the day. But it's an interesting. It's basically equivalent to the last gen Mark 7 Sport. So you got all the performance enhancing stuff on a sort of more base level car, but for the first time with summer tires, because GTIs come on basically marshmallows
all season.
No seasons. And we had a Jetta GLI that had just absolutely got its ass handed to it by the Elantra N. And we're like, okay, well, I'm not going to bring another Jetta GLI, even though there is a new one. There's a facelifted one, and VW had it. But at the last second, we're like, no. 380 comes on summer rubber. Let's give this car a chance. And it would have had a chance. But typical Mark 8 Volkswagen, it's all so let down by the computer crap. So you can turn off stability control, and most of the half of the time you could get it off the line without the traction control being pissed off. Can't do a huge clutch dump. It'll get mad. But if you just sort of feather it out 3,000 RPM under a bit of boost, you can get it off the line. So where the front wheels are immediately chattering, you kind of want to keep them right at that limit, right where they're just starting to slip. And it took me a couple times, but I finally got that thing where I could get it repeatedly off the line without hitting stability control. And every single fucking run, right as you're at 6,000 RPM in first gear, the tires have made it the whole way through the gears without wheel spin. They're just starting to slip it's all the way through first gear, so without slipping. You're just at that limit about to slip, and it would shut it down. It would shut it completely the fuck down. Traction light flash and just pull power and then go right back on. And it wasn't spinning tire. Like it was, but it wasn't spinning. We're talking a couple % slip. It's not like a huge flare. It has a limited slip diff, right? So we know it's a locking diff, an electronically locking diff. You know it's not one wheel peeling. It's not doing that. Who cares? Let it fucking slip. Stability is off. What are you worried about? Like, it's not like it sees you doing a 7,000 RPM clutch dump and quickly closes the throttle so you don't shatter your transmission. There is no harm in this. And this is frustrating because I know Volkswagen's capable of better. I know the GTI is capable of more. And so I think I did 3 or 4 runs and I got within the same 10th on all those runs. And I'm like, well, that's all the fucking thing will do. And then I was like, what happens if I shift right at $6,000 and not at $7,000 or wherever it was? It was like, 1,000 before red line. So 5,700 versus 6,700 right before the traction control kicks in, same time. But I know if I would have been able to stay in first and ride out first for that extra 1,000 RPM, it could have been in contention. But it finished dead fucking last. And we'll talk about the race in a second. Mini Coopers.
Yeah, like all new, had no idea that it existed until I saw it sitting there.
You and the entire rest of the world. I can't think of a car, an enthusiast car, that it is in recent history that's been more ignored than the new Mini. This
is the thing that happens where, like, this happened with the new Beetle also, where after you come up with a retro design and then you'd redo it once and then you're like, okay, now what do I do? Like, I've redone the retro design. I think that people are just like, however many times it's happened, it's just like, how do you continue to iterate on that? And then also, like, I think the ingredients are not there for the true dyed-in-the-wool enthusiast, which is what drives the ultimate interest in those cars, because if it's only available as an automatic, it just becomes this sort of also ran thing. It's a city car for people who aren't into cars, as opposed to like an enthusiast sought after device.
That's exactly right. I think we were talking about that. If the fact that this car doesn't come with an automatic, if you ever need manual, if you ever needed as a car company proof that the availability of a manual transmission is important, or the exclusivity of a manual transmission is important to a car's image, this is it. Because previous John Cooper works, like the last JCW was automatic only and no one paid attention. It was phenomenal.
And you look at the values of the cars, even like of the first of R53 JCWs, they're like massively valuable compared to the standard cars, like twice as much money. People are paying 20, maybe even 30 if it's a low mileage R53 JCW. Like enthusiasts like those things if they're actually designed for the enthusiast.
Right, especially when they're manual only. I think that's really sends a very clear message to everyone about, there have been so many cars through the years. Their mission, right? This one was a mind fuck. Mm-hmm. So Anthony Esposito flew in and picked up this car from the airport and showed up at the place where we were all staying. And he gets out and I'm like, how's the Mini? And he was like, it's horrendous. And I'm like, what? Horrendous. He's like, it's so fucking slow. I can't even with this thing. The transmission, it doesn't have shift paddles. And so it's a dual clutch. It was the only dual clutch automatic there and does not have the ability to force a manual shift, period. And I'm like, that can't be. You missed the pedals. No, there were no paddles on the steering wheel. And there was also no paddles on the shifter, which is a stupid little fucking, basically a toggle switch, a dingle dongle. Sticking around the thing, and I'm like, so I get out on the road, and I'm like, this can't be that slow. It felt, the idea that it had the same horsepower, 200 horsepower, that it was in the same class as a GTI was genuinely laughable. Like, we were laughing in this car, like, what is wrong with Mini? How did they screw this car up so badly? Like all Minis before it, steering is hyperactive, but this time, hyperactive, dead, and imprecise. So you turn in, and it's nothing, and pew! Like you basically, a squirrel farts 3 blocks over and you've hit the tree on the opposite side of the road because you've turned so much more than you expected to. But there's this huge dead spot right on center. There's massive torque steer, which I'm fine with on a car with good steering feel and really precision, like a precise sense of straight ahead. I hated it. I absolutely hated this car. Anthony hated it. We were just going through the interface. It was purposefully cutesy. Yes. And everything in the car is so purposefully cutesy that it's fucking unusable. And then came time to test it. I went on the forums and I find that there's a secret mode that you can go in to actually change it so that I think it was the cruise control, the radio volume control could force shifts. So I got it actually in its manual mode. And it was so slow to respond. I'm like, there's no way this is ever going to be faster. I don't know how I'm going to get a decent time out of this. We're going to embarrass this car. It's just going to be a whatever. Blah, 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 blah. And I just put it in like, it doesn't have a sport mode. It has a...
Yeah, they have like moods and one of them is like...
Zippy or something.
Yeah, go-kart.
Your go-kart mode. And I'm like, oh, shut the fuck up. Like, just stop being a twat. And I put both feet in. I'm like, oh, it's going to give me a 2,000 RPM launch. Me. You suck. Let my foot off the throttle. And it does, off the brake. And it does a perfect, absolutely picture perfect launch. I mean, within 3 feet, it's spinning its front tires the entire way through first, does not cut power on the 1-2 shift, which it typically does in normal driving. It's really slow. Like it almost feels like a single clutch automated manual and how slow it is, not the forces. But, instead of the whoa, it's like, whoa. It beat the fucking GTI. Mm-hmm. We were shocked. Yeah. It feels so slow. It never pulls hard, but it doesn't stop pulling.
Yeah.
Shocked us all.
Yeah.
And while the GTI is sitting there and like cutting power and wheel hopping and cutting.
Yeah, the Mini was like just a fire and forget.
Fire and forget every single time. Just this beautiful wheel spin all the way through first, right into second. Perfect, consistent, drama-free, fast as shit. Couldn't believe it. Mm-hmm. So I guess hats off to Mini for making a car that
it was buried enough and you can't manually control it.
No, all you have to do is go into go-kart mode, which is a bunch of stupid presses. But then you don't think it's even launch control because it's so like off the line, but actually being off the line wound up being really quick.
Yeah, because it was had traction the whole time.
Yeah. And then there was the Mazda. Mm-hmm. Did you drive the Mazda?
Just moved it around. The thing that I think about, or that I hear when I think about the Mazda, is Randy Pobst saying how remote and civilized and quiet and refined it was.
That's funny. I got in it I think it was the last car I tested. And I'm like, this thing feels like it costs literally double what any other car
comes. That's the refinement comment for sure that Randy was making.
You start it in that WRX is like, and then the engine goes away. And you're like, oh, zoom, zoom? No, zoom, zoom. It was a zoom, zoom start and a rev flare, and then it went away. Yeah. And then the shifter has a great feel to it. The Prindle, it's automatic only. Mm-hmm. And then the steering is perfectly weighted, and the materials are gorgeous, and it smelled nice. And I was like, oh, what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. And then I tested it, and it was supposed to be fast. Like it has the same horsepower as a GTI, or more horsepower than a GTI, and then 80 more pound-feet of torque. Yeah. It should have fucking left everybody for dead, and it just barely eked out a win over the GTI. Something was wrong with this car.
You think so?
Yeah. So
the brakes weren't great either.
Well, I will say, I remember driving this car on the launch, the all-wheel drive sort of turbo one, thinking it's perfectly lovely in the Mazda sense, and it's nothing sporty about it. I was wrong. It's not that there's nothing sporty about it. There's anti-sportiness to it. Like it's actively against sportiness. Mm-hmm. It's I tried to do a cool down lap around the track just to try to cool everything down. I'll explain why, just to get a better 0 to 60 time out of it, thinking maybe everything had gotten hot. It was horrendous. Like it understeered like worse than the WRX, which is saying something. And then the brakes were basically on fire from just a cool down lap. No sporting pretense whatsoever. But what happened was it would brake torque with full boost, like give you full boost, full beans off the line, explode off the line, and then sort of run out of revs at $5,000, like it does. It shifts at 52, 53. It doesn't rev high. And then did the slowest 1-2 is since basically you drove an ancient, broken, ice cold Ferrari. Mm-hmm. So it's it is painfully slow, but at high RPMs, this one started to really surge, and I've never felt one of these cars do this before. So you could hear and feel.
Is this the car that we put? We thought it didn't have the right octane gas in it.
So Mazda publishes power ratings on 87 octane and then on 91 or 93, and everyone else shows up on whatever fuel they show up on, and we assume the fleet management company or whoever was taking care of the car has put in the correct gasoline. We have to assume that, and we've been screwed before. We had a rental car once that had clearly the wrong gas in it because we did a whole episode and 3/4 of the way through it. We had to put gas in it, put 91, and all of a sudden it gained almost a second through the quarter mile, but hey, too late.
You mean lost?
No, I'm sorry, lost, yes. It became 1 second quicker through the quarter mile. Mm-hmm. So this car I was convinced was running on 87 or 84, or perhaps was just empty, or something was seriously wrong. So we had about a half a tank in there. We took it back to the hotel that night, and then burnt as much gas out of it as possible, and then filled the rest of the way with 100 octane race fuel. So what was in there was 92 or whatever.
Yeah, we did the math.
No change. Mm-hmm. Even after we just drove it all day just to make sure. So I think something was wrong with this car because I don't remember them being surgy and miserable. You could hear us. A shame because it was.
Yeah, I mean, without really that much torque and four-wheel drive, you would have some expectation that it would move.
Yeah, and we checked afterwards, and I think I was 0.3 to 60 off of the car driver number or motor trend with somebody had gotten a number out of it. And so yeah, definitely wasn't running properly, and that was a shame. But what a lovely car.
Yeah, very refined, small Mercedes.
Yeah, little Mercedes. That's the one that if you're not a speed demon college kid, I would say that's an easy sell to your parents. It's a Mazda. It doesn't nothing wrong. Meanwhile, it would have left there were no Hondas here because the Civic Type R is way too expensive.
Right.
And then the Civic Si is way too slow. Would have been a second behind even the Mazda. And the joke is you'd have a hard time selling your parents on a Civic Si, right? Oh, it's an Si. No, you can't have that. It's too fast. This thing would leave that, even broken, would leave that thing for absolute dead. And you're like, Mom, it's got all-wheel drive. And you can get it as a hatchback
Mazda.
Or a sedan, either way. And no, it's totally safe and whatever. And then just fucking leave your parents BMW for dead. Mm-hmm. that was probably the most fun drag race episode for me in a while.
Yeah, a lot of variability and good like launch requirements and a lot of powertrain variability also.
Yeah, there were a bunch of front-wheel drive cars, a bunch of rear-wheel drive cars, a bunch of all-wheel drive cars,
Manuals
automatics,
and
manuals, one DCT, sort of ran
Mostly
the gamut.
turbocharged, but not all.
But I like the fact that you can get some. All of those cars were genuinely fast. I mean, the GTI was the slowest car here.
Yeah, and they were all like 911s from the 90s fast.
Although, hold on, the GTI might have still been faster. So we did the rear-wheel drive race. So we did front-wheel drives together. Then we did the rear-wheel and all-wheel drive cars. And then we raced the winner of the two races. And we just had to do that for time. I would have loved to do 3 establishing races, all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, and then a 3-way race for the winner. But the Mazda never went up. The all-wheel drive Mazda never went up against the front-wheel drive GTI. I don't know. The rear-wheel drive 86 or either. I don't. Yeah. So there were a bunch of combos that didn't happen, but yeah, they were all fast.
Yeah, for reasonable money by especially today's standards.
And the GR86 did me proud. That it kept up.
Yeah.
It did not embarrass itself, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, it's naturally aspirated manual, like in Miata, images of Miatas from the 90s, which is like, oh, it's,
Although Miata would have been
well, right Mazdas behind, are fast now too, yes.
Would have been right
what
behind
are
the
these
86.
mid-5s cars?
Yeah. 5.6, I think I got the 86. I think Miatas, the last time I raced them together, they were one, which is an Icons episode on 86. It was, the Miata was 1/10 slower through the quarter mile. So it would have been behind the 86. But it really did drive home the difference between turbocharged and naturally aspirated cars. And I know everyone knows that I hate turbos, but I also get to experience them back to back like this, like as you did. And you drive a bunch of turbocharged cars and they all have slightly different boost curves and personalities. And then you get back into something NA that's quick and geared appropriately. And that's an important thing. There's a multi-dimensionality to the power delivery and sound.
And a sort of transparency to what you are going to get. Mm-hmm. Which is makes the car kind of instinctive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just no contest powertrain wise, and I don't particularly like flat fours.
Yeah,
I mean if that 86 had a inline 4, I'd own one. I'd have one.
You think so?
Well, without question. Yeah, without question. I mean that, especially if it were a hatch, right? If they sort of made good on that one Toyota concept that from the last generation that was a GR86 hatch, or that was a
shooting brake thing.
Yeah. That hatchback usability with that sort of fun factor, then I could finally shut up all the people who say he's an EV evangelist with his e-Golf. Goodbye. I would have no choice, I feel, but to go and buy that just for fun. But fun episode. And in a world where everyone's saying all these cars are too expensive, everything's $100,000 bullshit.
Yeah, and that's a shift that's happened. I would say in the come down since the COVID peak. That cars used to be just everything. The Rav4s were going for $50,000 and over sticker. All that's kind of done. I think we've returned to rationality, which is a great place to be.
I'm going to say $35,000 in the new car world is really cheap. Yep. In the greater actual world, is way more than I've spent on almost every car I've ever owned.
I know. I'm the same way.
Yeah. That, to me, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. But
and they depreciate. That's the problem. Is $35,000 goes down to 0. And then the older cars you spend, even if you spent $20,000 on it, had $15,000 worth of repairs built in, you're still better off financially. And that's the problem. But I can't do new car versus old car like that. That's just out of the scope of these races and episodes.
Yeah. But it's a realistic decision that someone might have to make, but it just depends on their mission and tolerance for nonsense.
It's typically it's almost always the old car wins for me because of the total cost of ownership being so much lower. However, for somebody who doesn't care, they don't want any issues, they just need something new without excuses, that doesn't break, that gets them to work every day with no second thought and a warranty. Go ahead, get a new car. I mean, sure. I get it, but not for me.
Yep. So not for me either.
So we just
because we mostly work from home.
That's all. Yeah. I need to move my home away from my home so I have a commute
to do some mileage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? Okay. We just reviewed 10 cars, or mostly I did.
Discussed. Yes.
Discussed.
Well, that's how it works, going behind the scenes of Cammisa's Ultimate Drag Race Replay.
Yep.
Join us next week.
Jake will be back in the next episode with his pinky up drinking tea as he was in the Bentley. That was funny.
Excellent.
Yes, go watch those episodes if you haven't yet. And we'll be back next week, probably wearing a ho outfit. Or a ho-ho or a ho-ho-ho outfit. That's a very interesting thing. Think of another word that if used 1, 2, or 3 times in a row has 3 different meanings. Because a ho is different than a ho-ho, which is a thing which is different than a ho-ho.
That's like a proper noun, though. It's like a brand.
A ho-ho?
Yeah.
But a hoe is not an improper. Very not.
An improper.
A proper hoe is a whore.
Ah, okay.
There you go.
Or a strumpet. All right, thank you for joining us. See you next week, perhaps.